and I'll let you know when we're ready.
Okay.
And I'm going right into chocolate here.
The chocolate is free to take. Anytime.
Awesome. Anybody else? There's only 3 pieces.
I'm good.
So a dark chocolate.
Yes. Should have been getting more sugar than you.
Yeah. It might be a little low blood sugar and I don't want that to.
Okay, we are ready whenever you are, Matt.
All right, okay. Not used to this, hard copy of the script here. All right, welcome everybody. November 16th, Public Safety Committee for CB6. I'm Matt Roberts, Chair of the committee. And tonight we're joined by CB6 Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. This meeting is called to order at 6:32 this evening. I don't believe we have any members of the committee on Zoom, so the point about cameras on, not pertinent here. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there's any members of the public here in the office, you can raise your questions just by raising your hand. If there's time following the committee's discussion, we'll field questions from the public. And Rupal is taking minutes tonight, so thank you, Rupal.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Can I get
Rupal.
paper and a pen, because I can't figure this out.
Yeah,
I can't get it to edit.
yeah, I'll get you a pen
No, I can do that.
after we're done with the general part.
Yeah, it should be a very easy,
I can't get it to
taking.
edit.
Oh, yeah, well,
Yeah, I'll work on retrieving you a pen
Okay.
in a couple moments.
So want to just, will a regular pen help you?
Yeah, I'll stick it in the paper, but.
all right, so that
Okay.
brings us to the attendance. Brendan, you can call the roll.
Okay, committee members, I will call your name. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Stu Desser,
Present.
Eric Goldberg,
Present.
Gerald Jones is not here. Rupal Kakad,
Present.
Steve O also is not here. Steve Perez,
Present.
Matt Roberts,
Present.
Ann Feldman,
Present.
and Hydra Zaidi.
Present.
We have a quorum.
All right, very good. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time and is on the screen before you. There's no objection. Actually, we never heard from NYPD, correct?
Correct.
So we're gonna have to strike agenda item number 1. Unfortunately, for the second month in a row, they're unable to join us. So that being said, if there are any issues within the committee or from the general public, we'll field them as a committee and then relate them at the earliest possible time. Because I know some people from the public may have joined to speak with the police. So and then we'll still keep that as we'll just amend that to be discussion of NYPD issues for number 1, and then we'll move on to discussion about proposed legislation to combat hate crimes. And I believe someone in the DA's office will be joining us for that.
Don't we have to adopt the minutes?
Let's see, minutes.
Yes, from May 18th.
Okay, yeah, that's.
But that's
That's
after
next.
that's after
That's
adopting the
next.
agenda.
Yeah, so are we good on the agenda? If there's no objections, then we'll adopt the agenda as amended. All right, seeing no objections, we'll move to the minutes from the May 18th meeting. Sure, distributed by the board office. If there's no objection, we'll adopt those.
I have no, like, they seem fine, but is it legit for me to vote to adopt if I wasn't there?
I think instead of, I hate when we say vote to adopt the minutes. It basically, if anybody wants to offer any corrections or changes, that would be the appropriate thing to do. But if there are no corrections or changes to the minutes, then we can adopt them as drafted.
I remember May.
I know, right?
Long time ago, had a whole spring, summer, now fall. So
Yeah, I'm good with that.
so if there's
Thank
no
you.
objections, we will.
Baby.
Oh.
People,
That's new.
this gavel can be a little dangerous here. All right, let's set some ground rules here. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand. I'll identify you so you can speak. Committee members, it's extremely important that only one person speak at a time, so anybody watching at home can understand. And there's no committee members on Zoom tonight. But if there are any questions from the public, you can raise them through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Right, if you just mirror this camera, like positioned very high up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're
Perfect for Eric.
me. It's
The rest of us who are a little shorter are barely visible. In any case, all right, so let's move to agenda item number 1. So obviously there's a lot of protests going on. We've invited NYPD. We were hoping that they could join us last month, but then the protests got in the way. I know Deputy Inspector Orlando from the 13th precinct is on vacation this week as well, so the purpose of that really was just to touch base, but since they're unable to join us, what I'll do is I'll open it up to the committee if there's any precinct issues in the 13th or 17th. I can tell you crime is generally not a major problem right now. Most categories have trended down in recent weeks. Obviously I can speak pretty much on the record for the 17th, less so for the 13th. In terms of the 17th, all categories are pretty much down except robberies, and it's really shoplifting or security engages that's driving that category right now. So other than that, I mean, everything is going fairly well. But I know there's some issues out there. There's a lot of quality of life issues people are concerned about, whether it's e-bikes, homelessness, people behaving erratically, you name it, they continue to come up. So any questions from the committee first? Any issues that you think we need to raise specifically with NYPD? With the precincts, obviously, for those who haven't heard, there were some budget cuts announced today, so that will impact the police department among other agencies in future years. Basically, they're short-staffed right now, so they've had to postpone multiple classes of recruits in terms of the police department. So I think that will definitely come into play as we get into 2025, perhaps even sooner. I know there's a lot of, off the record, there's a lot of people who are looking to retire as soon as they hit the eligibility mark. And congestion pricing may also play a role in police headcount as well, with a lot of officers and even firefighters that are looking to take assignments in the outer boroughs or elsewhere in Manhattan, or join other departments in the suburbs or somewhere around the country. So those couple things that may play a role in terms of public safety down the road. They're not issues today, but we'll have to monitor those things. So just keep that in mind, that the headcounts are already very low. Hopefully these budget cuts will not be as severe. Obviously, what's driving it is a projection on the migrant line as far as the expense that's projected. So that's a projection. The federal government can obviously provide some funding between now and then. So we'll have to see how that all shakes out, but a lot can change. So, but I know the cuts to the library system are being implemented as early as next month, just a couple of weeks. So, but the police issues will be down the road a bit. So,
Although,
yes, yeah.
I heard that there are gonna be no, like graduations, like no additions from no police recruits joining the force for the indefinite future.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen the exact timeline, but there are some recruits, joining the precincts now. But the classes that are being postponed are obviously ones that they were still, they haven't even accepted applications for yet. So there's gonna be some gaps in there. And I think that will eventually change, but that might be something that, if somebody wants to introduce that as new business, whether it be tonight or we can put that on the agenda for January. If, we'll see how things shake out over the next few months, but that could be something that we have to take up in committee here is just, ensuring a minimal head count within our precincts. So we have 2 precincts, one that fully falls within the district boundaries, and then the 13th, which falls primarily in the CB6 district. There's a portion in CB5 as well. So yeah, that's where we stand there. Any issues we need to address with NYPD from the committee standpoint, and then we'll move to the public if there is anybody. No, good, okay.
Are we gonna follow up with, on the, NYCLU concerns with the?
At some point, yes. We haven't heard any further feedback from them. And I haven't, Brendan, I know last time I spoke to Jesus, he was saying that nobody has reached out about that issue from any side of it. So it's on the back burner for now. Haven't forgotten about it, but it's something that we may revisit if warranted.
That's a question. First meeting here, for this committee. Has the task force, the mayor's task force on retail theft, has that already been discussed? Or were we gonna, should we ask questions when they show up?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't discussed that particular task force in this committee. We did do a big meeting on shoplifting with the DA's office in early 2022. And I think we'll revisit that early next year. Because it was the initiatives were kind of being rolled out at the time. So we were asking a lot of preemptive questions, but the issue hasn't gone away. I don't, there are some numbers that say it's down, but I think it just might be underreported.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we can say with any certainty that shoplifting is down. It's just that you're dealing with a lot of, low-level workers, people making minimum wage in the retail storefronts, and they don't want to be bothered with the paperwork. And
Or they don't wanna,
happens.
they're fearful.
Right.
It's even the higher end, although
Yeah.
outside of our,
Yeah, I mean, in this-
yeah,
Absolutely.
There's no one, but
Luxury
I'll
and-
give you an example. 3 weeks ago,
Mhm.
I was at Lululemon, which is 5th and 47th, I think. And there were these 3 individuals came in,
Mhm.
hoodies, mask,
Sure.
they just grabbed a bunch of stuff and went out. And so I was there with some other people as well, and I spoke to the manager, and the manager said that there's no use reporting it to the police,
Right.
and they just reported up the chain within the corporate
Yeah, they
thing.
like.
So I don't even know
No.
if NYPD actually gets the full
No.
picture anymore.
No, and that's why outreach, I've been trying to do some outreach, in my capacity as the president of the 17th Precinct Council, with some of the shops. We don't have a ton of high-end retail, in this particular area. A lot of it's just west of the district lines. But yeah, outreach is key, relationship building is key. Because if the police are just a bunch of strangers that show up, when they're called, then
It's too late.
they will take the report, of course, but the motivation to collaborate is just not there. And that's something that I think that as a community, we can definitely try to improve within the retail community. So
It would also be interesting, I mean, from what I've sort of read about it, it's a sort of small percentage of people that are doing, it's the sort of
Yep.
80-20 rule. And so it would be interesting to get the feedback from the police on their
Yeah.
perception of that.
Yeah, a lot of times, it's a relatively small number of people from everything that we've seen, but it continues to happen. So
Yeah.
I do also want to acknowledge Eric Straza from the District Attorney's Office, who's joining on Zoom. So Eric may be able to shed some light on this. We're not going to delve too deep into this topic tonight, but I do want to have a bigger meeting, either January, February, to talk, more about shoplifting at the business improvement districts and like we did about a year and a half ago. And it was a good conversation, highly attended by the community. I think we had over 150 members of the public join. So definitely a hot topic and hasn't gone away. But I fear as consumer spending tightens a little bit, the retailers are feeling the crunch a little bit. I also have worked in the industry for 15 years, so know a little bit about the retail business. But with consumer spending potentially slowing, shoplifting not subsiding, retailers may be in a crunch where they decide to close some stores. So that's something that would definitely adversely impact the district and something we don't want to happen. So Eric, any brief comments on shoplifting from your office's perspective? We can delve into it in the new year, but.
Yeah, I think that going at first off, hi everyone. Nice to see you, even though the camera's kind of moving around, trying to keep up with it. But yeah, I think some kind of new update in the new year would be great. Just to kind of come with some stats and some information on what we've done and what's worked with our Small Business Alliance 5-point plan. I know that that's probably a lot of what we spoke about in the beginning of 2022. I think you guys have kind of hit the nail on the head in certain elements of this, and it is certainly a relatively small number of people who are responsible for a large number of retail theft incidents. I believe this might be a little outdated now, but last year we were citing that it was around 18 to 20% of people who are responsible for around 50% of all shoplifting cases. I know we've had a lot of success communicating with NYPD, making sure we're identifying those key recidivists and basically making sure that we are, whether that's pre-packaging a case because we know that they're going to be rearrested and then we can be prepared as it comes down the line, increasing the communication with small businesses, making sure that, maybe if certain information or there's a picture that's painted with a complaint or an arrest, we actually get the full picture and more context, whether it's, store owners or managers being aware of, this is the same person that continues to hit our store day in and day out, just information like that. So I know that we've had some success. I don't really want to speak off the cuff on it, and just kind of, I don't want to, take stabs at what could be helpful updates. I'd rather come prepared, whether that's bringing an attorney to a public safety committee meeting early next year, or coming with some stats from our data team. I think that could go a long way.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think both of those are the ways to go, and we'll get the business leaders from the district involved as well. And I think it'll be a good conversation, and hopefully we can make some progress and maybe connect some of the retail folks with members of the DA's office who can help identify these people, because it's just not getting any better. I don't know if it's getting worse, but it's certainly not improving. So
I think there's also quite a few other factors at play here, whether it's barriers to reporting or people not knowing what to do, potential modifications to trespassing notices, things like that. And on that note, I know that we've also been having some meetings with groups of retailers or store managers to make sure that what they're doing on the trespassing notice and is something that we can work with and things that we can look at successfully to move forward on those cases. So I would love to bring that to this group too, if potentially in those conversations you become aware of multiple retail spaces, operators, or staff that thinks that they could benefit from conversations like that with our office. We definitely would want to bring that to your community and the CB6 area as well.
Definitely. Sounds great. So yeah, we'll put that together either January or February, depending on everyone's schedules. But I do want to make sure that we include all the necessary participants, so that will determine exactly when we schedule it. So thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
So any other items, NYPD related items that we should flag before we move to the hate crimes piece? All right, and Brendan, nothing from the public, correct?
I do not see anything from the public.
All right, very good. All right, so we'll move the agenda to item number 2. So we have a piece of state legislation that's been proposed by Senator Hoylman's office, also co-sponsored by many others. And I know DA Alvin Bragg was supportive of this piece of legislation as well. obviously part of it is a reaction to everything that's going on over the past couple of years. We've had the big Asian hate issues. We've had some issues based on the Middle East conflict. We've had a whole bunch of other newly defined incidents. So what this piece of legislation basically does is it adds to the list of potential of offenses that can be charged as hate. So I know there's points on both sides here. So I don't know where the committee stands on it. We drafted a reso that can be manipulated in many different ways, including some of my chicken scratch. So it's definitely a work in progress. I don't like to write full resolutions before the committee has actually had a chance to discuss the matter. So it's more or less a shell that we can work from. So any opening comments on, so Eric, I don't know, do you have any statements that from your office that you want to put in front of the committee?
So I know that the DA and alongside Senator Hoylman Siegel and Assemblymember Grace Lee, they had a formal press release where they kind of spoke, and I can cite some things from his remarks as well, if that would be helpful. But I think the gist of it is exactly what you said, Matt. I think since the pandemic, we've seen a significant rise. I mean, I know you cited that we've been down in basically all index crimes across the board, and a lot of that has been representative throughout the borough. But that being said, we still have seen a significant increase in hate crimes and hate-related incidents, which has led us to really expand our ability to take on those cases, whether that's breaking down barriers to reporting, increasing language capacity, adding new positions. I know the city granted us a total of an additional $1.7 million specifically for us to invest into investigating and also prosecuting hate crimes. I think as that time went on and we had those additional resources, we realized that the current state of the legislation just wasn't sufficient for a large group of hate crimes that we were seeing, but that we effectively could not use that conduct to then tack on a hate crimes charge to. And just so everyone knows, basically allows us to, if we determine, and here I have a little slightly more specific language just to I'll pull this up. If we prove that a person committed an offense that was motivated by a belief or perception about a victim's perceived or actual membership in a protected class, so whether that be, just as some examples, race, religion, national origin, gender identity, disability, sexual orientation, then it would allow us to basically bump up the charge one grade. So for instance, a misdemeanor would become an E felony, E felony to D felony, and so on. And so for us, it really just came down to, and I don't know how much you want me to get into it right now, but just adding some more common sense or things that felt less common sense to us based on what we were hearing. So it expands the eligible charges from 66 to 97. And just to give like a few key examples that I think it could be representative of the larger bill, some things that we just thought didn't make sense given the current state of the legislation were that currently things like graffiti could not, in any form, could not be charged as a hate crime. Somebody can be charged with assault as a hate crime, but just an individual person. And if that elevated to a group of individuals or a gang assault, that for some reason could not be charged as a hate crime. Just as other examples, and these were mentioned in the press release, anti-Asian slurs to a Chinese restaurant, for instance, or homophobic slurs at a gay bar couldn't be charged as a hate crime. So these are just some of the things that we were trying to work in, and we thought, especially as we're hearing a lot more of these cases over the last 2 years, unfortunately, that our inability to pursue them as such was something that we wanted to deal with and would hopefully create some improvements in the legislation.
Thanks, Eric. So I'll open up to the committee for discussion. So any questions, any thoughts on this? And there's a lot of offenses listed there. I'm not familiar with each and every one of them. So I don't know, does anybody have any remarks either for or against this legislation?
Also, Matt, let me know if you would like me to display either Senator Hoylman Siegel's legislation or the resolution you drafted.
Yeah, if you could pull up the legislation real quick, and then we'll get into the
hate to always be the one going first, so please, if anybody else has comments.
It's a small committee, so,
I'm usually the one who goes first, so it's your turn.
Oh, well,
well,
thank
Stu,
you,
Stu
Sue.
undoubtedly will get into the legal.
All right,
of the
cool.
bill, so.
So I am in support of like the concept of this, like this totally makes sense. The editor and me, I really appreciate you bringing us something that like we can bounce off of.
Yeah.
But, and frankly, one of the things I was shocked, like how can murder in the first degree not be eligible as a hate crime, right? Like that just was crazy to me. But I feel like it would be a more powerful reso if we started with a little more history of kind of like why are we, you know,
Yeah, I mean.
the whereases are bringing.
Yeah, we can, obviously, again, that was just a very quick shell that I put
Yeah,
together.
yeah.
Obviously, you can go into the context a little bit more, and pull whatever numbers we need to, in terms of statistics, either in the city or from our district if we have them, or however we want to spell it out, obviously. It's not intended to be a full resolution.
No, and
So
again,
yeah,
like,
that's-
it's great to have, like, I'm an editor, I'm not a
Yep.
writer.
So that's where committee participation will come in. So I want to hear from everybody.
So there's that, and there's also, I noticed like the whereas, I liked the whereases at the end, but there's one missing, like whereas technology.
So, yeah, so that's like I threw that in there semi-intentionally, but it's an incomplete thought, because I want us to think about technology and
How
how
it
that,
can,
and how that has, and now obviously AI is unfolding as we speak, and we're all kind of learning
Yeah.
what, what the next iteration of technology will do. So I don't know, if there's any thoughts on, how that might impact hate. I know social media for one right now, there's a lot of things being said. There's really no jurisdiction. I mean, as to, what can be, people are saying things from all different countries. There's really no, it's hard to pin things down to a specific point on the map in terms of geography. So I mean, there's just a lot of things out there, the technology. So it's more of an open-ended thing to make us think more about the technology and how that is perhaps exacerbating the number of hate.
and even like you say, like, I hadn't even thought about AI and, like deep fakes and how can. that
Yeah,
be
and
an
just
issue?
even things that people are producing memes online. That
Yeah.
now can maybe become offensive, and if they're targeting a specific individual or ethnicity or type of person for any reason, then, I think we need to incorporate that into our thoughts as well, because that's, it's becoming easier and easier for people to do that, and sometimes they're not even intending to hate, to do anything that's hateful. But I obviously for the lawyers here can talk about the legalese and you obviously have to prove motive and everything, which is typical on any crime, but yeah, I think technology is certainly, I think we've barely scratched the surface with AI and what that can do to fuel some of this hate speech and just different chats that are going around the internet. So there's more just to get us to think. So
I just have a question on data regarding hate crimes. So I went and looked today at the dashboard and the data available. Looks like what they've been tracking since 2019.
Yeah.
Up through September 30th of 2023. There's no more recent data than
Yeah,
September.
September probably.
So unfortunately, it doesn't capture, there's been a lot of events in the
Right.
last month and a half that I'm assuming would be reported. Maybe they do these quarterly. I don't know why,
Yeah, I think a lot of,
they collect the data.
I mean,
but-
it's not that
Yeah,
long
So the
ago.
hate crime, in terms of the numbers of hate crimes, that's available weekly at the precinct and city levels. I think they're actually down a little bit to last year, but I mean, we're really tracking it since the pandemic. So
Right.
that's where the increase.
And then the other question I had regarding that was, has there been an expansion before of the hate crime? The way this bill is expanding, has that happened before? Because I'm just wondering how, things, if you start counting more things, it
Yeah.
looks like hate is
Right.
increasing. Or there's more incidents,
Well,
but
yeah,
it's
you're-
because we're adding all of these
Right.
new charges, then it's gonna be like, wow, hate crimes are dramatically
Triple,
increasing.
right.
Well, not really, we're just, what are their categories? So I'm just wondering
Yeah,
how the data has played out over the years in terms of those.
yeah, as far as I know,
How-
that this, I believe the legislation refers, there's something, I think there's a blurb in the legislation. It might be at the top, Brendan, where it discusses that, the last time it was updated. I don't know.
Let me go to the legislation
Yeah.
itself as opposed to the summary.
Yeah, it might be in the summary, but yeah, it's from what I understand, it hasn't been updated in a while, and I also do see that too, that, you can get to a point where every crime on the books is eligible for hate crimes, and what does that mean? I mean, in general, there's generally a motive for every crime, so it could be taking us down a slippery slope as well, so
And I noticed that, so 2022 was the peak of the hate crimes that were reported, and then in this year it has dropped. Again,
yeah.
we're not seeing probably the full year, but it looks like
Like
there was like a
year-to-date.
peak, and then, yeah, it kind of it's come down actually in 2023 compared to 2022. But again, that's reported, so I don't know if
Yeah.
that means they're down or just people are reporting them less.
Yeah, and the part we won't know is, are there crimes that were committed this year or even last year that were in those categories, and how many were in those categories that are on that list of potential to be added? Because I know some of the more recent incidents that have happened here in this area. I know there was somebody on 42nd Street a couple weeks ago that spray painted "Free Palestine" on the street. And the person was arrested immediately, and that was also sent to the hate crimes unit for possible review. I don't know exactly what they ended up doing with that one. I know in other more common instances here, somebody spray paints a swastika on a synagogue.
Yeah, that seems very different to
Which-
me.
Obviously so there's varying degrees of, and then there's somebody who, might have been murdered or might have been stabbed because somebody, perceived that person to be of a certain ethnicity or have be something that they just didn't like. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of variables there. So it's,
I guess that's where prosecutorial discretion comes in, right?
yeah, and Eric, I don't know if you have any thoughts or anything you want to add on that, but yeah, it's really, obviously the attorneys have to review all the evidence and look at the motives, and I don't know, where they draw the line in terms of classification on hate.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speak to it, just obviously because I mean, Matt, I'm not an attorney myself, but I certainly know of some resources or some attorneys who would be able to speak to this further in our office. I mean, I know what you kind of alluded to just now, Matt. Is something that comes to mind for me is that there's effectively an in-depth investigation into whenever we are choosing to consider elevating a crime because of some kind of hate-based motive. That being said, as far as where that line is and what kind of pushes it over to, this is okay, we will actually now bump that charge up or consider this hate motivated, I wouldn't want to speak to. So let me bring that back to the office. And just so everyone knows too, if there's any other questions that I can't answer, I'm bringing all of this back regardless, but I'm happy to bring back specific questions. And then specifically with that, I'm sure that our chief of our hate crimes unit, Hannah Yu, is a great resource and often speaks to the community about things like this. So I'm sure she would be happy to come and shed some light on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
All right, committee members, any other, Sue?
Yeah, so first, I endorse what Ann said, and not just because she's holding sharp needles. I don't understand why murder one, for instance, was excluded 20 years ago, and I sort of want to know what the logic was in excluding that whole list of eligible crimes that were excluded. Otherwise, this legislation looks like it's simply correcting, it's filling in what was missing the first time. I would make some changes in the reso though. I would not have the whereas where we say that it's been increasingly targeting Jews, Muslims, Asians, and so on. Because then we're excluding other people who should be on the list and who actually rank high. So people who are Black males, for instance, have been.
Yeah, I think I took that from the press release, but we can modify that any which way.
Right, so I'm just saying that our language would be better without that. And I would also condense the list.
Yeah, I mean, we don't necessarily need to, we don't need the full board to critique every single charge that's on that list, but we can even make it general. If we agree that all of them are valid, then we can just make a general statement. If there's ones that we feel don't necessarily belong or questionable, then we can also note that in our comments as well. So so do you have proposed language that you would, if we?
I could.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know that, I mean, we can decide later if we actually want to pass a resolution tonight or wait for more comments, but in the meantime, we can edit.
For the list, I would just say the list of eligible offenses includes first degree murder, second degree rape, fifth degree arson, certain sex crimes, illicit chokeholds, gang assault, and graffiti, among other crimes.
Okay.
I'm sure that you caught all that.
Yeah, no, but if that's the direction the committee wants to go in, I can make sure that's typed in and make sure that the language on screen reflects the language.
No, correct. I was just saying, am I reading it correctly? Jostling like elbowing someone?
It's like,
Isn't that too weak? I mean, jostling being
Well, again, this is just.
it's an aggravated assault already. I'm sure it must be there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but yeah, I mean, I could see how, maybe I just, somebody just comes along and.
Then it becomes so much of
I
a
know.
perception of whether you bumped into
but
me or was it?
I think it's, I'm sorry, just there's a gender thing here, I think, too, where it's like jostling. I don't know if there was also a groping. And I don't know what the technical term is, but I kind of felt like when I read that, it was like, what happens to you in this subway as a woman? Like that.
I sort of had a broader question that kind of goes to this, which is, if the crime is the crime, right? Whether jostling is a crime or whatever, if that happens, but why isn't every crime eligible for a hate crime? Like if hate is involved in any crime, why are we just listing these?
It's
I
the
guess.
motivation.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like conceptually, right? Like if you're trying to minimize hate, what is the difference on the offense that's committed, right? If hate's involved and we're saying we wanna police manage hate, then, I mean, why isn't that every crime could get whatever that one step up is? That sounds like, it looks like Eric has a point of view, because I guess it's to him, yes. I'm
Sure,
just.
so I don't know if this is a full and complete answer to your question, but I know that we have heard some of this for people who are in support of the bill, but don't think it actually goes far enough. Basically, why would you not propose for you to be able to, exactly what you're saying, tack on some kind of hate crime element to any kind of crime if there is a possibility that it could be motivated by some hate-based reason. I think that it is something that we'd be interested in, but I think especially as it relates to getting a bill that can be successful after it's introduced, that this is something that more seemed to be a starting point and more common sense, additions to kind of upgrade it or modernize the current state of the legislation, and that it would have been kind of a tougher battle should we try to include basically every crime on the books and try to get them treated a similar way.
No, that makes sense. I was just more curious conceptually, but practically, I understand that. And I was just curious for the group, what the distance.
My guess
Yeah.
is the prosecutors who have done this kind of work are seeing the ones that are falling through the cracks, and so they've targeted the crimes that they want to tack on the hate crime, rather than just say everything that
Those are
the universe of all potential crimes, but like these are the ones that we see and that we
Right.
would like
It
to.
just gets to your point around, some of them seem, first degree murder and jostling. Certainly there was a gap.
A really wide
between
range,
those
like, I
two.
was reading it and I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
it pretty much covers everything.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what's happening statewide is, again, I mean, Eric speaks on behalf of District Attorney Bragg here in Manhattan, but again, the state legislation is statewide, so I think statewide, they're seeing instances of probably all of these crimes or, you know, have in recent years, and they probably would love to tack on some extra charges, but haven't been able to do so, so I think that's really where it's coming from, but yeah,
I mean, the main difference between something being called a hate crime and not, and Eric, I think this is probably a question for you. It's not about the burden of proof to make the case. It's about the penalty. Is that correct?
I'm trying to,
I mean, you have to prove the motive.
For both the hate crime and the crime.
Well,
I
yeah.
think for both pieces, you have to prove.
Correct.
I'm not a DA.
Well, no, I don't know that you have to do if it's not a hate crime. You just have
The
to
motive,
prove that
like the motive,
that
Yeah,
the crime
the
is,
motive
if it's a
will come
crime,
into
the
play,
motive.
it was
I
done.
think, yeah, motive I think comes more into play if you're trying to prove a hate crime, like what was your motive?
Right, but I mean, once you have proved that, I think the difference is more about what the penalty is than,
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, but you still have to prove
Right.
both those things. Hey,
right,
I assaulted someone, and then I have to also prove, if you want it to be classified as a hate crime, that there was
Right.
motive
Mhm.
involved. as well.
Eric, is what we've all said here correct?
yeah, that is my
As-
understanding
I
as
know you're
well,
not
that,
hired.
right, that additional piece would also be, it would have to be proven that it was hate-based. But then also the crime itself would have to be proven, and I'm trying to also, and with the second part of your question, that it's really the sentencing or the consequence that's added. I mean, it would literally bump up the charge, so there would be an impact to the sentencing, but I'm trying to think of, I know that you asked something maybe more specific about the penalties. I want to make sure I'm answering it if I can.
No, I mean,
Maybe
I
that
think,
does answer.
yeah, in general, I was like, sort of, what are the consequences of it being a hate crime versus not?
So I think that each, very quickly on that each different grade of, say, if it's an E felony, a D felony, you know, as it moves up, the penalties and the sentencing possibilities become more severe. So it would really depend not necessarily on the hate crime itself there, but what crime that is attached to. So obviously, if it's something like you know, rape in the third degree is bumped up to rape in the second degree, then that penalty that comes with the rape in the second degree would be more severe and therefore would be in play here.
Nuance.
I would be interested in knowing why these other offenses were excluded the first time around. Is there a reason, because that's something that I think we should be
Mhm.
looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody on the call here on the meeting knows the answer to that, but I'm sure we can get some more context. between now and the next
Brad
one.
of Holman Siegel's
Yeah,
office
Brad's
right now.
office would probably
Yeah,
know a little bit more, but I mean, I'm sure the laws were created even before his time, so
yeah,
it may not be a clear cut answer, so. So yeah, we can try to get some better context on that.
Or there might be a jacket to the bill 20 years ago that would.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can look and see. Is there anything else any other questions that we want answers to before we look further at the reso? Basically, whether we pass the reso tonight or not, I want to just kind of, you know, get it a little closer to finished form. So if anybody has suggestions for language, did you actually have anything written for language?
I just have my scribble. I agree with Ann that,
Yeah.
that the sequence, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we want to rearrange some things and summarize a little bit more.
And fill in the technology
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, and then maybe consider any thoughts on that, so I don't know. We can always take it out if we don't have any, you know, clear succinct material.
can we pass a reso on kind of the sense? Can we like say we're passing without the specific language?
I would prefer to dot our i's and cross our t's here, because, I mean, the holidays are coming up. I don't think the legislation is gonna move that quickly. Brendan, do you happen to know, does it say on there where the legislation, it was just
It was
introduced.
not even in committee.
Yeah, it was just
Or it's
introduced,
in
so I mean,
committee, yeah.
it's not.
I am,
it's gonna
I
be
am happy
passed.
to work with Stu on some addings, like rearranging some language, adding some stuff and,
Yeah,
And I would just suggest adding some more context, because this is gonna be speaking
Like
to the
why?
community, so like
Mhm.
definitions, like.
Yeah.
What does a hate,
why do we
you know,
insert?
why bias, why are we upping charges
Right.
for hate, you know, why are we doing, you know, just
Yeah.
give some more context.
and if you look at, like you say, the press release or the legislation itself has some of
Yeah,
that,
it has. language in
that
it.
we can still, I love being, can I just say, I love being in a committee where people do their homework, like, it's a pleasure.
That's how we try to work around here.
So, Brendan, can you reach out to, like, is that appropriate to reach out to
To,
Brad's office and see if they
um,
have a history?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure if we had a little more time between when it was introduced, they would have been, I mean, I think he's in Israel right now, but I'm sure somebody from his staff.
Yeah, somebody from his staff,
I mean,
it's
again.
possible that one of our contacts from his office from back when Roman Siegel was overlapping with some of CD6 would still be around, but I can,
Yeah.
regardless, I can reach out to.
I'm trying to think, who's
Yeah.
been around the longest? It's like Liz Kruger, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I do though, just want to understand, I'm not sure I understand where digital communications comes in. I understand that, you know, that hate that attitudes get spread through social media. But I'm not sure that has any, that should be reflected in our resolution.
yeah, and again, I don't know, I don't have a concrete thought. I just wanted us to think about, you know, because a lot of what we're seeing, a lot of the things that we're seeing are fueled by, you know, social media, whether it be a TikTok challenge or something, or people just posting on, you know, comments more readily on the various social networks. And it's, you know, those remarks are being viewed faster and faster, and the world keeps you know, everything kind of gets passed around a little bit faster, and that may also be, you know, motivating more people to join certain causes that lead to hate.
I mean, most of these are obviously physical in nature, except, I don't know, if graffiti is deemed to be online graffiti as well, or is it just actual physical graffiti? So probably, then it's 100%
Yeah, online
physical.
graffiti would be, I mean, it would be hard to pinpoint exactly where the person
Oh,
is
absolutely,
for
yeah,
enforcement
yeah.
purposes anyway.
But I do think there's a,
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that there is a thought here, which is, there are crimes that are committed online through, I don't know the definition of it, but, you know, libel, slander, you know, misrepresenting photos of people, attributing things, you know, I'm saying, and if we think that that's part of the realm of hate, maybe there's a suggestion that there's certain things that should start to be explored. Maybe not in this legislation, but at least going forward. So, I mean, a lot of hate does take place online, it seems, and I know that it's a difficult line to draw, but, that's something to maybe put in as, I don't know, I mean, something to think about more directly to encourage people who are crafting this legislation to think about how this evolves, I think was
Yeah.
your point.
Yeah, and I
To
think,
start,
and
yeah.
that may be all we can say in the form of a resolution.
And that may actually answer my question, because I was looking at the listing and I was like, falsely reporting an incident in the third degree, like, I don't even know.
Like if I think something happened and maybe I was mistaken about it.
Right, but I
Yeah.
mean, maybe that's something that is, like, you're posting something online and
Yeah.
you're falsely reporting.
Right.
But I think
Like, I just
I
don't
think
know.
that might have come from that incident in Central Park with that woman who was walking her dog.
Yeah,
with
Right,
that,
with the.
yeah, oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna call the cops and say a
Yeah.
black man is
Right.
attacking me. I think that's kind of where that falsely
and that's-
reporting kind of, I think what they're trying to target is at least that's what I thought of
That's
when
actually
I
a very
read
good
that.
example of probably where it could
Yeah,
have been.
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
But, I mean, another example I can think of that I do have firsthand knowledge of some community members that, just don't like somebody for a given reason. I don't know if it rises to the level of a hate crime, but they constantly call the police, and make reports about, whether it's loud music, partying, different quality of life offenses.
But if they're doing that online, right, like maybe that's where the technology comes in.
Yeah, I mean, that's
But it's
also-
medium agnostic, right? It would be the complaint
I
itself.
don't know.
I guess there's harassment issues that take place online that
Right.
probably. But just something to think about, yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah.
what the answer.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
so so let's see, so we've got some good comments here. We have a resolution in the beginning stages. Do we want to just put together a task force to kind of, so I think, do we want to,
Kind of flesh it out.
yeah, like, we're not gonna meet next month because it's the week before Christmas. So I know a couple people said they're gonna be traveling already or about to travel. So we'll meet in January. So over the next 60 days, if I want to get like 2 to 3 of you to
Here's 2 of us.
2 and 3.
I'm happy to. I had actually written a few things,
Okay,
just
great.
like,
Awesome.
so.
We'll do a task force, so the 3 of you can meet over the next 60 days, and then put together a little bit more of a concrete resolution, and then we'll reconsider it in January. And then at the same time, we'll try to get some answers on the questions about the background and everything along those lines.
Which individuals are gonna be fleshing out the resolution? And
Stu, Ann, and Steven.
Stu and
Stu and Steve.
I just wanna make sure, I get, whatever information I get from Senator Will and Siegel's office to the right people, so it's Stu and Steve.
Yeah, I mean, you could send it to the entire committee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
appreciate that. if you're
Yeah.
working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep, absolutely.
Um,
and we'll get minutes along the way. so-
Eventually, I'm having tech problems here, but eventually.
Well, or we can
Yeah.
see what's online, just to make sure we've
Yeah, you have an extra-
incorporated all your.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you have any issues. with the minutes,
No, it's just,
you know.
it's a new tablet that I'm
Okay.
not familiar
Oh.
with, so that's where the issues are. I just need to be familiar.
The joys of new technology.
Yeah.
All right, anything else on this topic for tonight? I think we're good on agenda item number 2. That brings us to the chair's report. I think I kind of hit on everything that I had in the chair's report. I know we'll try to get NYPD. We'll just keep inviting them until they actually come. I know it's a lot of it's out of their control. That's my. In any case, yeah, the police availability is largely out of their control. I mean, there's protests. that pop up. Just so everybody knows, the protests in large part are unscheduled, meaning nobody walks into a police precinct and says, I want to schedule a
They're not,
protest.
right, they're
They're
not-
permit. They just kind of show up in areas where people assemble and then sometimes they're known through social media, everything's tracked. I know there was a social media post that came out last night, where there were some landmarks in Manhattan that were noted, but the police are on it and, will maintain visibility. There are none in our district, from what I can see, but it's a lot of the landmarks west, that the group had some issues with, so that's being identified. So I expect the protests to continue unannounced. There was, I can talk about did everybody see the incident on Friday night? It went viral on social media. So it's 43rd and Lexington, just down the block here, where an individual climbed a flagpole and basically just started ripping flags out.
Oh, I think I saw that on,
Yeah.
yeah, now that, yeah.
Yeah, that happened Friday evening around 9:30. And the individual was arrested. So I reposted that on the 17th precinct social medias. accounts, and they were charged with there were multiple summonses issued there, so I know that was a big one for it. Was right. A lot of people didn't know exactly where it was, but it was 43rd in Lexington.
Yeah, I didn't know where it was when I saw the
yeah.
video, but as soon as you said the flagpole, I knew which video you were
so
talking about.
so that, I know a lot of people were upset about that, so that person was arrested right on the spot. They had plenty of resources in place to address that. It got a little chaotic and everything, because they didn't know how many other people were connected to that person, so. But everything, from what I understand, nobody was hurt, and it's close to arrest, so. It's in the hands of the prosecutors at this point. So other than that, the demonstrations have been largely peaceful. So there haven't been a lot of issues. Some civil disobedience, blocking the roadway and stuff like that, traffic issues. But that's generally the worst impact. So I know if people are stuck on a bus or stuck in a car, and these protests went up, it's an inconvenience. But in large part, there hasn't been a whole lot of other issues.
Yeah, the guy that got killed though, with that died after hitting his head.
Yeah,
That was,
yeah, I mean, there's been a few isolated
Yeah.
things, but for considering the numbers of people on the streets, there
Yeah.
in the thousands at times, it's been largely orderly, so we'll see where things go. Obviously, the holidays are upcoming. The holiday traffic management, the police department's busy with that, so there'll be more traffic agents out there, maintaining the flow of traffic, trying to keep the gridlock from forming, so. Yeah, I think that's all I have for the chair's report. Any, old or new business?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two pieces. The first is the least dramatic. A few years ago, I'm sorry I didn't bring the year with me, the city enacted a law that holds commercial property owners, rather than the city, liable for injuries, when there's a sidewalk hazard. The way the law is written, the property owner is notified. They have something like 90 days to clear the defect. If they don't, theoretically, the city can do the repair and bill them. The city has not been doing that, and there's no penalty other than that, except there's a lien on the sale, but there's no monetary lien. I think that I would propose that we invite Ed Pinkar, the New York City DOT Manhattan superintendent, or whatever his title is.
Borough Commissioner.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the Borough Commissioner for
Borough
DOT
Commissioner.
Impact.
He's a good guy, but I'd like to understand what we would have to do so that the Department of Transportation will actually have the money necessary to make these repairs and then bill it back to the enterprise. And I mean, I don't think this should be trivialized, because if you're injured, it's a good gamble, I think, for a lot of commercial entities to not do anything.
Yeah.
And if you're injured, you can't, you can sue them, but it's after the fact. So this is something I think is a public safety issue.
Okay, Brendan, yeah, if you can, let's just confirm that the transportation committee, I would be willing to do a joint with them. Because they already have the relationship with DOT.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Ed would actually come, or, Colleen or somebody from the office there can,
Yeah,
potentially.
I will say, just as a note, a couple notes. First of all, the office has dealt with sidewalk service request issues, and Colleen Chattergoon, our intergovernmental person at DOT, has tended to say with these sorts of issues, unless it's like I forget how many families, I think 3 family units and under, that is the property owner's responsibility. That's the response DOT tends to give us. So just some information from a service request standpoint.
But it doesn't, I mean, I was sort of thinking more about a commercial.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
it could go both ways, but I mean, I think, so a part of it, I mean, perhaps you know, perhaps communication between the property owners and the city just isn't there to, a lot of times property owners just aren't aware of their responsibilities.
Yeah.
When they sign all these documents, it's, the language is in there, but it's not necessarily clear. But, so that might be something that, you know, maybe the city council needs to look at some, adding, you know, an intro somewhere to, just to tighten up the communication and make sure that everybody is informed of their responsibilities. All right, thanks, Eric.
Do the rest of that first.
So that, I mean, that could be, so, yeah, I mean, I understand the city is, you know, tends to deflect a lot of these things, but.
I would think that would be a moneymaker, I'll tell you the
I
truth.
know, I mean, yeah, the city could use the money, but oftentimes they don't have the infrastructure in place to, collect it.
I think the issue is that the city, I think the issue is that the city would have difficulty collecting,
From
the
the property
expenses
owner.
back.
Mhm.
But
Right. I mean,
whatever the answer is, that's something that I think should be resolved.
Yeah, I mean, all right, Brendan, why don't we pass the question to DOT, keep Brian Van Nieuwenhoven in the loop as well. Just so, and then we'll see if it needs to become an agenda item, we can put it on the agenda here or join the transportation, or if they feel strongly about taking it up, then they can do so.
Yes, I mean, it's analogous to like clearing the snow, right? Which
Well, I mean,
property owners are,
some are better than others. I mean, well, the snowfall, I mean, the city and the media are very clear that if the snowfall stops at a certain time, you have until noon to clear it. If
Right.
it stops overnight, you gotta have it, you know, there's certain timelines that are very clear, and the media reiterates that every time there's a storm. So, I think you need something along those lines where it's clear cut, in terms of, you know, sidewalk issues and obstructions and stuff like that, where it's, but it might need to be legislation, it might.
or
already be on
maybe
the
it's
books.
media, like you said.
And it could just be a communication issue where the laws are already sufficient to, they're just not enforced, and a lot of times the property owners have no intention of skirting the law, but they just don't
But
know.
they assume it's the city's
Right.
responsibility
And
because it's the
If the city
sidewalk.
owns the street and the city owns the
Yeah.
sidewalk, one would think that that it's the city's responsibility. So I think we just need, you know, maybe the district, board office can clarify, that as well, so.
So what are we looking to ask DOT, or what are we looking to clarify again?
Um,
No, I mean, I think I understand what the text of the law is. I don't have it with me. But, the problem is that the law does allow DOT to make the repair, but DOT is not making the repair, and the hazard just stays indefinitely. And these are hazards, and, you know, you can get seriously hurt. And so this shouldn't be trivialized. I mean, it should be something that's addressed.
Absolutely. So the question is, why isn't DOT?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
believe, it's a matter of
resource.
being reimbursed.
Yeah.
You know, there may not be a budget for it, but whatever the answer is, I think that we should understand what the reason is, and we should act toward, correcting it.
Yeah, it's possible I might have asked that question at some point as well, because I've also been quite frustrated with certain sidewalks
Yeah,
falling into disrepair, but if I don't see anything on my emails where I do get an answer to that, I'll ask DOT and report back.
okay. Yeah, and you had another, right?
I did,
Go ahead.
but which reverts back to the protest question, and it's not a specific proposal, it's just a vague suggestion. Because this is one of those issues that humans have been unable to deal with for 250 years. Protests are supposedly permitted by the police department. And they're policed by the police department, and there have been a number of issues over the years. In terms of permitting. First of all, you know, the Supreme Court says that, you have to allow a protest. The municipal government can decide time, place, and manner. And so NYPD, of course, will want to make it, they will want to take the protests away from the foreign mission where it's occurring. They will want to put people in corrals where they can and so forth. And permitting and NYPD is also, frankly played some games where they wanted to be able to declare that any two people violating a particular law, like, you know, walking in the street, could be declared an illegal parade or protest. So there are some issues with the fact that NYPD is the one that issues the permits, and NYPD administers how these events are handled. I don't know that I don't have a specific proposal for how to get around that. I would like there to be some discussion though, and you know, this is separate from any kind of police misconduct that we've heard reported at protests where, you know, innocent people are arrested or something like that, or you know, without where the officer claims to have been there and witnessed something and was not there, and where there was violence against protesters. That's not what this issue is. That's a policing issue, but this
You're
is.
talking about a conflict of interest.
I'm sorry?
You're
Yeah,
talking about
yeah.
a conflict of
Yeah,
interest.
basically, yeah. I mean, police like order. Protests and democracies are by definition almost not order. So there should be a way to try to remove some of the discretion out of the hands of the police department.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, the police tend to be, you know, they're as neutral as you can get on a particular issue. So I mean, their responsibility is really just to set up everything, make sure that there's a safe space for people to protest. Obviously, the unscheduled protests, they don't have that luxury. People just show up and they march wherever they march. But the issues come into play that it may not be safe, you know, wherever they're going. Like there might be traffic flowing, so they have to now stop traffic unexpectedly and reroute people down different streets because the protests are, you know, forming. And so I mean, there is a safety element to it. I'm just not sure exactly I mean, if let's say you create a separate city agency that doesn't exist today to now, you know, maintain protests. Now they still have to communicate with PD for barricades.
Right, and so there's a timeliness issue there.
So it would just, I mean.
And I understand what you're saying about a conflict of interest, but I also feel like, do we know of any instances where permits were denied? Or, you know, what I'm
Yeah, I mean, the
like,
First
is this
Amendment
an
really
actual
doesn't allow them
problem?
to deny permits for, I mean, they might be able to deny sound in certain instances, but.
Or
I mean,
amplified sound?
Yeah, because it
Yeah.
has to be, because we have issues all the time over in Tudor
Noise
City.
complaints,
In
yeah.
this district by the UN, where there's an audience of maybe 3 people and they want this big megaphone.
Right,
And
Dog
now,
commercial too.
yeah, so, well, that's also one of the more heavily used protest locations within this district. And thankfully, that plaza actually serves to take a lot of protests off the streets here and keep traffic flowing and keep, you know, pedestrian traffic moving, because they have that whole block where they can take up. There's thousands
Yeah.
of people that can fit there, and it's conveniently located near the UN for any international, and there's a lot of missions, you know, within a couple of blocks of there. So it's a convenient location that can still serve that symbolic need of, you know, being in the general vicinity of the UN and some of the missions based on what people are protesting. So you do have large and small protests there that actually serves to minimize the disruptions to this district. So I mean, Stu, I would say if you see any instances where you know, that you would call out, like, as far as, you know, like, could have been handled better. Because basically, if you walk into a precinct today and say, I want to schedule a protest, they'll be like, okay, just fill out this form and tell us, you know, where and when, and then they will try to facilitate the scheduling process. So I haven't heard any complaints in that regard. I know some people are just confused as to where they need to go and what they need, you know, what.
You have to say how many people you're expecting.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times you won't know.
Yeah,
I mean, things get redistributed by organizations, you don't necessarily know. So anytime I ask the police, you know,
they just say
they
yes.
don't know.
Yeah.
How many people are gonna show up? It could be 25, it could be
2,500.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no way of knowing, but that's where intelligence comes in handy. They look at social media, they look at, are there bus loads of people being bussed in from other parts of the country, for certain things that, that's generally known, or is it just groups of people that are showing up, you know, on a random afternoon or evening to have their say. So a lot of that, is very circumstantial. So, yeah, I don't know, Sue, if you have a specific recommendation, we can pursue it.
I can look into it. I mean, there are certainly organizations that have looked to protest in one location and were denied the permit to go into that location.
Yeah,
And sometimes when you have a protest where more people show up than the sidewalk can accommodate, for
Right.
instance, someone steps out on the street, they're instantly arrested. So, you know, these incidents do happen. And, you know, some of that is policing, some of that is the permit problem.
yeah, I mean, just so everybody knows, if somebody does, you know, they get several warnings before you know, it's clear. People, a lot of times people do go out in the street because they want to get arrested.
I understand
There's
how-
sufficient, it's not like somebody's gonna be like, oh, you're in the street, you're under arrest. It's no, they'll inform you multiple times, usually through a megaphone if it's a large gathering, that if you do not move, you will be arrested. So it's not like you're gonna see anything like that. The other thing is, a lot of times if they know the crowd size or have a good estimate, they will barricade off a couple lanes of
Yeah.
traffic for the demonstration if the sidewalk is not sufficient. But obviously that disrupts, you know, buses and traffic and also creates other safety issues too. So I mean, they do the best they can. If there's other recommendations, like if you see a specific protest or if you get wind of something that couldn't happen in a particular location, let's look at it. There are certain missions and certain blocks in this district where it's just there's some safety risks. I can't really say more in a public setting, but there are some safety issues that could arise in a couple of areas, but they generally try to accommodate protests whenever. So. Any other items of old or new business? Alright. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Very good. Seeing no further business, the meeting is adjourned and we'll call it 7:00.